Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Yes, I want to answer a whole bunch of questions you might have. Apparently I'm not clueless, thank God for that, right? This topic is Dragon of Icespire Peak and the Lost Mine of Phandelver resources. This is a Dungeon Master guide, so if you are a player, it's probably not appropriate for you to be hanging out in this live stream, because I will potentially give away spoilers during this, so I would suggest you do not hang around. I do have hundreds of videos that are more appropriate for a player. This is for the Dungeon Masters today, okay? Just to let you know. Do you have questions? And I'm talking about the where, how, why, what, who, and when. And the idea is not so much to answer all those questions because it would take so long. The idea is to give you a bunch of resources so you can find the answers for yourself rather than have somebody talk to you about it. So here are a bunch of resources that you might find useful in preparing and running the two most popular Dungeons and Dragons 5e adventures for beginners, and I'm talking about beginner players and beginner dungeon masters. Although I do have some issues with some of these adventures, they are essentially considered introductory adventures. And the adventure we're talking about is the Dragon of Icespire Peak, although I would say beginner, more like intermediate for me. I think that it's probably more scaled for intermediate, but certainly the Lost Mine of Phandelver is designed for beginners and beginner players. Again, both adventures have their own problems, hence is probably why you're here. If you're having problems and trying to prepare it and run it, you're probably here for that very reason. I have read and watched all of the articles and the videos from the people that I reference and refer to in this video. So if you are watching this and thinking, okay, he's just gone through, no, I have actually read and looked at all the material, okay? I did not just go and pick a whole bunch of stuff and then stick it in a description. It is there because I have used it. I have also run both adventures. So the Lost Mine of Phandelver and the Dragon of Icespire Peak, I've run both of them. I never included or combined the adventures, okay? I will go back to that topic because I know somebody's going to ask me, but I have run them separately. That's how I think they should be run, but then again, people will do their own thing. These are the resources I recommend that you look at, and probably in this order, because I'm going to list the most important individual first out of all of them in terms of your preparation. And that has to be Schley Flourish, Mike Schley, okay? Mike Schley has a website. It's been around for years. He also has a YouTube channel, and he gives excellent advice for both adventures. So if you're playing through the Lost Mine of Phandelver or you're playing through the Dragon of Icespire Peak, he has written material and video material on both adventures so that you can actually get a good idea of what's going on. Now, he is probably by far the most experienced online dungeon master I have come across who provides any kind of advice on Dungeons and Dragons, and particularly Dungeons and Dragons 5e. Hands down. Now, I'm serious when I say this, that his material is top notch. Just about every person who is a dungeon master who provides advice on the internet or runs a YouTube channel has been influenced by Schley Flourish. And if they say they aren't, they're lying, okay? Because most of his techniques and the advice he gives out is usually drawn from his website or his YouTube channel or just discussions with him in interviews and so forth. He's one of the most influential dungeon masters out there, and you can't go wrong listening to this person because he gives you practical, no-nonsense advice that anybody can deal with, okay? And therefore, he's the one you want to go and check out. I have provided links to his material down in the description, and I will try my very best to make sure I provide links to everything that I discussed today so that you can go and find them easily rather than going and having to do a search. One of the things that Schley Flourish also did is he explained in an article how to combine Dragon of Icespire Peak and the Lost Mine of Phandelver. Now, I will never do this. and I'll explain to you why. Now, he gives you some really good advice in there that answers a few of your questions. It will not answer all of your questions with regard to combining the two, because I want to make it clear to you that I want to give you an analogy. If you have never run a Dungeons and Dragons adventure, and you have never ever done that, and you've never made your own adventure, what you're trying to do is compare it to, okay, I'm learning about cars. I've never driven a car before, but now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take two cars and I'm going to strip them down, pull them apart, put them back together, and make myself a high-performance racing car. That's how difficult it is. Nothing about combining those two adventures is easy. So when people talk about combining them, and I know the designers keep going on about how you can do that, seriously, okay, they're not going to help you there. It's not going to help you in the slightest. They are not really being honest with you about how difficult that is to do. So please don't fall into the trap of thinking you can pull it off just because you decided you read an article on the internet, because it's probably not going to be enough. Okay, self-promotion here. You can go and check out the How to D&D YouTube channel. Obviously, you're watching it right now, but I want to make it clear, I do have a Dungeon Master Guide for the Lost Mine of Phandelver. There's about 44 videos in there that cover a vast array of different topics and questions you would have around NPCs, about locations. I also have a Dragon of Icespire Peak series of videos as well. They're all Dungeon Master Guides as well that will assist you. It is not complete. You will find I will be releasing a Dragon of Icespire Peak live stream or video every month for as long as it takes, and it's probably going to be years. So if you're looking for an ongoing resource, I'm going to be doing that every month, and this particular video is all about that. On top of that, not just the Dungeon Master advice that you can get from my channel, if you have trouble with the game mechanics, so how do you play Dungeons and Dragons 5e? I have a whole bunch of very short videos on the game mechanics for Dungeons and Dragons, explaining but also demonstrating with dice, miniatures and maps and whiteboard, pens and so forth, and showing you the calculations and explaining everything in a lot of detail so you can understand how to do that. I also have monster tactic videos on many of the monsters you will face or have to deal with in your Dragon of Icespire Peak adventure and your Lost Mine of Phandelver adventure, because I knew those questions would come up, and so I thought, well, I would answer those questions as best I can. So that's why I made those videos specifically for that purpose. Now, away from channel promotion, and let's talk about somebody else. He's been around for about a year. Bob World Builder has a YouTube channel. He also has a Patreon. I think he also has a website, but he provides advice for Dungeon Masters on running Dragon of Icespire Peak. He also has a playthrough. I would recommend going and checking out his content. Now, he will say to you he has finished that series of videos, okay? But I know for a fact that Bob has not finished his videos on the Dragon of Icespire Peak. In fact, I know he has 2 more videos coming out, and they are coming out very shortly, and they will be answering some of the key questions he was not able to answer necessarily in that much detail in the videos he has already made. The other thing to bear in mind when you look at Bob's Dungeon Master Guide for Dragon of Icespire Peak is he was running through the adventure with 1 player and 2 sidekicks. Okay, it was not a full-blown group. All of my advice is run, so all the groups that I run have at least 4, 5, 6 or 7 players. So when you're getting advice from me, it's from that perspective. When Bob is giving you advice on the Dragon of Icespire Peak, it's from the perspective of a single player and 2 sidekicks. Okay, just to make it completely clear to you so you don't get confused, because there is a difference. You do actually have to run the games slightly different based on the size of your group. Okay, another person you may not have heard of, Matthew Perkins. Matthew Perkins is a great guy. He's no relation to Chris Perkins, if you're wondering. He has his own YouTube channel. I believe he also has a website and a podcast. But he has Dungeon Master guides and advice on the Lost Mine of Phandelver. But the difference with his reviews and I would say advice is he's taken the adventure and he's stripped it down to its bare essentials. So if you wanted a really tight, fast adventure where everything is designed to make the players want to continue playing and you don't want them getting sidetracked, Matthew Perkins is trying to do that. And he's not finished. He's almost there. I believe his plan was to have 9 videos. How do I know all this? Because I've talked to Matthew. He has, I believe, 6 right now. That means he has 3 more videos to release. And the intention is that this particular adventure, if you follow his guides and everything goes well and nothing goes wrong, which of course is pretty hard to do, you should be able to play through the Lost Mine of Phandelver in about 9 sessions. It took me 12 sessions to play through that particular adventure, I believe, and I don't know if Matthew can pull that off, but I've already done a video with him, and I have another one coming, and you should find those reasonably useful too. Okay, when you're a Dungeon Master, I know a lot of people say the first book you should go and buy is the Player's Handbook and then the Dungeon Master's Guide, and I would say to you, no, don't do that. The first book you want to buy as a Dungeon Master is definitely the Monster Manual for Dungeons & Dragons 5e. Why? Because you can get a lot of advice for free in a PDF on being a Dungeon Master, okay? Wizards of the Coast releases that for free. Not everything, but a good deal of it, okay? The other thing is that things like the Player's Handbook, a lot of the information you'll need in there, okay, you're not worried so much about character building yourself as a Dungeon Master. That's the player's problem. But as a Dungeon Master running the game, all the rules can be accessed for free. So if you're going to buy a book, okay, go and buy the Monster Manual first. Now, this is your go-to. When it comes to monsters and you want monster lore, it's the best source of information you can possibly get is your Monster Manual for 5e. If you don't want to spend money and you can't spend money, then go and check out the Mighty Glue Stick. You might have you might know him as AJ Pickett. AJ Pickett lives in the same country as I do, and he does great free videos on monster lore in detail. And if you join up with his Patreon, you can get access to all of his transcriptions of his videos, so it's all in written content if you don't want to sort of try and make notes as you're watching his videos or listening to his videos. A really good resource, and I highly recommend checking out those. Another one that you might not be aware of, and that is the Monsters Know. The Monsters Know has been around for a while. Keith has got a website, he has a book, and he deals with monster tactics for Dungeons & Dragons 5e. He's gone through the Monster Manual, and he's pretty much got a complete series of monster tactics for almost everything. And if you're running the Lost Mine of Phandelver or Dragon of Icespire Peak, chances are he's got what you're looking for, okay? Monster tactics. If you're not really sort of too sure how to run those monsters, there's a good place to go as well. Little known source as well that people might not be aware of, and that is the Dragon of Icespire Peak Compendium. This is where you'll find most stuff compiled. It's pretty much all the stuff I've already talked about. You might find a few additional things as well. I do recommend checking that location out because it has some very useful information, particularly if you're running Dragon of Icespire Peak. If you're running something like the Lost Mine of Phandelver or Dragon of Icespire Peak, which of course you would be, Facebook groups. There are 2 Facebook groups for Dungeon Masters. The Lost Mine of Phandelver DM group, I have joined that. I've been a part of it for a while. There's also a Facebook group for Dragon of Icespire Peak for Dungeon Masters. These groups are usually private, and the reason being is they do not want people who are players just dropping in and seeing everything they talk about. So when you join them, the intention is that you are a Dungeon Master. You know, you should be joining them because you are a Dungeon Master and you're running these 2 adventures, okay, whether it be the Lost Mine of Phandelver or Dragon of Icespire Peak. Now, the great thing about the Facebook groups is they are constantly producing content, answering questions, dealing with issues, and I would say they are by far the best places to go if you really want useful information. I know that people say, you know, use the community forums are a great place, Reddit, but Honestly, Reddit is nothing compared to the Facebook groups. The Facebook groups are dynamic. They are constantly dealing with questions that people have, whereas you'll find the Reddit posts are sporadic and they sort of run out of steam, and there's not quite the same sort of feedback that you're getting from there. So go with the Facebook groups. I think you'll find them useful. I know a lot of people do not like Facebook, and that's why they use Reddit. But honestly, I've found them to be the best place to go. Okay, if you have the Dungeons & Dragons Essentials Kit, I highly recommend using Sidekicks for small groups, whether it be the Lost Mine of Phandelver or the Dragon of Icespire Peak. I found myself, when I was using it, that it worked well. When the group was a bit small, incorporating them, the great thing is they're simple to use, they're not too complicated. They give you a little bit of fleshed background, so you get personality, ideal, bond, flaw, and it's up to the players to roleplay that, not you, the dungeon master. You give that over to your players. You don't have to do that at all. In fact, they can ignore that stuff and just use the mechanical side of the sidekick and focus on their actual character if they wanted to. They are not going to die easily in combat. They will be able to stand toe-to-toe with the other players' characters. They work well. So I highly recommend, if you've got the Lost Mine of Phandelver and you do not have access to sidekicks, there was an Unearthed Arcana, which you could probably access. Very shortly, we're going to get the full rules for sidekicks and Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and I recommend checking that out. It's probably one of the best aspects of that book as far as I'm concerned as a dungeon master. Okay, the next thing, Dungeons & Dragons Beyond, or D&D Beyond. I know a lot of people don't like this website, but there's a lot of really good tools there. Many of them are free, and there's lots of advice. So when you buy the Dragon of Icespire Peak, in the back there was a code, and you should have downloaded anything you could from D&D Beyond, the additional supplementary adventures that take place after Dragon of Icespire Peak, all of the maps, any of the images, screenshot stuff if you need to, but it's all there, and you will find it hugely useful considering so many people are having to run their games online right now. Even if you're not running your game online, you'll still find it useful. So I suggest going and picking up as much stuff as you possibly can. The other thing I found really useful about D&D Beyond is easy to build a character. You can use phone apps, that's great. D&D Beyond is still very good at doing that as well. And it has a step-by-step process. It can actually show new players how to build a character so they can figure it all out without you having to stand beside them and explain everything, because you probably won't have time to do that all the time. And it's good if you can just give them a location they can go to and say, okay, go and build a couple of characters and get used to doing it. Phone apps, again, really good. 5th edition character sheet is one of the ones that I tend to like. I know there are other ones out there you can use. It just depends on how much you're willing to spend. But D&D Beyond, you can do a lot of it for free. Okay, there are additional content that you will have to access, and that means spending money, but still a great place to go. Okay, if you're into maps for the Lost Mine of Phandelver, Mike Schley does the maps for the Lost Mine of Phandelver, and if you want high resolution maps, this is the place to go. And I would recommend picking up his stuff. Okay, it's supporting the original artist who actually made the maps, and he's been selling them for some time. All of his stuff is really good, and if you're running an online game, you're going to find them hugely useful, because you can plop them into Roll20 Fantasy Grounds, or you can plop them into what is the other one that people tend to use? Fantasy Grounds. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. But this is the place to go to get your maps for the Lost Mine of Phandelver. If you want high resolution, if you want the low resolution stuff, you can probably just Google search that stuff if you really wanted to. You can also get the maps off D&D Beyond as well, but you would have to pay some money. Okay, what about pre-made characters? If you're a dungeon master and you want to have a whole bunch of pre-made characters or pre-generated characters, you can get them off the official Dungeons & Dragons website. Okay, you can get all of the stuff from the starter set, and they also have additional pre-generated or pre-made characters you can access as well. And these characters go pretty much all the classes go from level 1 to level 10. There's a version of every single one of them. So that means that you can print out a whole lot of stuff, make it available to your players if they do not want to build a character, because often building a character as your first point of call for Dungeons and Dragons is a bit much to deal with. So therefore you don't want to really do that. Okay, give them a pre-generated character, and I recommend using them because they work really well. And the Lost Mine of Phandelver pre-generated characters are fantastic. There are none in the Dragon of Icespire Peak, but you could use many of the pre-generated characters in the starter set, or the ones on this website, the Dungeons and Dragons website. So those are all of the resources that I thought generally people would find useful. Hopefully this was something that you can actually incorporate into your game now. And if it was, fantastic. As I said, I have many videos on the Lost Mine of Phandelver and the Dragon of Icespire Peak and other aspects of the game, how to actually play the game, monster tactics. You're welcome to go and check out those videos. They are all in playlists. I have hundreds of videos for players and dungeon masters. If you want to support the channel so I keep doing video content like this, you can do that through my Patreon page. I have an affiliate link to Amazon down in the description. I also have a merchandise shelf underneath all of my videos. If that's not really something you can do, then fine, just watch my videos, okay? That still supports the channel if you're watching my videos. Make sure to share, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.